Well, hello everyone. I am Mark Tucker.
And I am Alan Furstenberg, and welcome to Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs, everybody. So, Alan, you've been busy doing some stuff. I've got some pull requests on Speech Markdown, so stuff that you're doing with multivocal. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. But before we jump in, I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about what the scope of multivocal is. So, back in my ASP.NET days, there was a pattern called model view controller. And in order to get to the controller, there was some sort of a router. So like whatever, hash / URL that you put on a website would ultimately lead to a controller, which would then, you'd use some sort of a pattern like a repository pattern or something to go get data or execute some command, do whatever your CRUD stuff is on the database side of things. You'd get some data back, and then ultimately you would return that in a view. So my question, I did look a little bit at multivocal. I think I know what the answer is, but does multivocal, I guess, encompass the whole model view controller part, or is it just the view part?
Well, I think of it this way. You can't spell multivocal without M, V, and C.
Ah, very nice.
There's a lot of pun, and I think you're the first person to actually raise that point with me. I would certainly say that multivocal is inspired by the model view controller pattern. Whether or not I followed that religiously or whether or not it is quite evolving that way, I don't know. But it was certainly inspired by the fact that you are going to have a view, and that represents usually that represents either the intent name or something that I refer to as the action name, which is different than the action, which is different than a Google action, or an outent name. And all of the data that is represented is in what I call an environment, which is the model.
Okay.
And then it basically does act in some ways as the controller. I tend to think of it in a lot of ways more as a templating, and in kind of, at its heart, really, it's a templating engine. So that for each of the actions that comes in, there is a handler, and that's your logic. But there's also this notion that you don't need a handler. If you don't have a lot of logic that you need to apply at any given time, or if you've got logic that applies to multiple of them, all that these handlers and builders are doing is applying the logic and storing a value in the model, in the environment. Mm-hmm. And then handing it off to a template engine that says, okay, based on all of these factors, here's the response that we're going to give. And then based on all of these other factors, here's how we format that response for that particular platform.
Now, a response could be plain text, it could be SSML, or it could be like a command to show a specific page,
right,
in
or
interactive canvas, right?
Or a combination of those. Okay. So it's, or card layouts that need to be sent back, or information on cards, or again, it's pretty, or even it might be redirecting to another scene using Actions Builder, or any one of a number of other things. But yeah, basically the kind of heart of it is that we're just sending back a response. And one of the big changes that I did in this round of multivocal is introduce Speech Markdown. So now Speech Markdown, well, when I talked with you earlier this year in Chattanooga, I was sold on the fact that Speech Markdown was the best way to make it easy for people to set up responses. And I firmly believe that it is. And after trying it out with Crosstalk, which was my test platform for a lot of this, I kind of realized that it really just does make it simpler. That previously you could set a text field that it was going to assume that this was going to be used for both text and SSML.
Right.
And that was fine. And it did a couple of little things to try to clean it up where it made sense, but it didn't really do a very good job. Now I can basically say, look, you're just writing speech markdown. It's easy for me to turn it into SSML or text. And if you want something different for either of those, you can set those in addition. Right. So if I wanted it to say one thing audibly and display something different, I could set both the markdown and the text fields. And it would do the right thing. It doesn't try to overwrite the text if you've already specified it. Right.
But if you don't specify the text, then you just use the to plain text formatter to get back the text?
Exactly.
All right, cool.
Because if you're just writing plain text on input, that's going to be what's coming on an output. So it made the most sense to me to just say, this is the easiest way that we have to prepare what our responses need to be. And that kind of was a big driver for all of what went into multivocal, was just being able to say, okay, look at what we've done in the past 15 years when it comes to developing web apps, and what we've done in the past 10 years when it comes to developing mobile apps. We do these things based on templates and patterns, and a little bit of a separation of the logic and the presentation layer. Multivocal tries to bring that to voice as well.
Very good. So like talking on the front end again, so there's some sort of a router that's going to direct you towards your handler in this case, and really that is handled by the Google services, the Google Assistant and the Alexa services, and because in the end, what's happening is what you're saying is getting turned into into text, and then it's running it through the automatic speech recognition portion of it, and it's figuring out what intent to call. So that's really the routing logic. And so the part that the handoff from either like Actions Builder or either Dialogflow or even Alexa is, there is some intent that's going to get called, some handler in your code that's going to get called on a webhook. Well, and that's
I want to be careful with terminology at this point.
All right.
The way I look at intents is, intents are what the user has said or what they've done.
Okay.
So that is a logical thing that comes out of the NLP system in Actions Builder or the NLP system in the Alexa Skills Kit.
Right.
That gets handed to multivocal, and what multivocal does with it is something different. Okay. So it can trigger a handler, and that's logic code. It can be one factor that is considered when we're looking for a response. So yes, the intent is, it's an influence, but it's not the only thing that determines what response is set back. And I think that's important.
Yeah, there's not a one-to-one mapping between the intent that you're getting passed from the NLP to the action that happens inside of your multivocal framework.
Right, and I think that's important because in some cases we want to send back different responses based on other things, like the overall state of the conversation, or in Action Builder, what node are we in? Or, if the user is asking for help, what kind of context-sensitive help do we have available for them? Or if they're on a smart speaker versus smart display, we might send back two very different conversations.
Right.
Because in one case we can rely on a visual, and in the other case we can't.
You could add an additional sound effects or description or something on the audio side that would be unnecessary on a multi.
And one of the things that this round of multivocal has added to it is making that a little easier to do, so that in cases where you've got common conversation components, so for crosstalk, I would, every time you answer a question, I would, it says something like, okay, I filled in THIS.
Okay.
Let's go on to the next question. Now it says more or less the same thing each of those times, but there's additional things that I need to be done if I'm on a smart speaker versus smart display. On a smart display, I need to send back additional information that gets displayed. On a smart speaker, I need to send back additional audio that gets played while it goes to the next question. And how crosstalk handles those two kind of made me realize multivocal needed more support for that. So that's one of the things that has got into this, that the conversation component part can now be, and it doesn't have to be, it's totally up to you as the conversation designer and the developer, can be a standalone component of that reply, and all of these extra parts can get mixed into it. And I think that that lets us do some really powerful things.
Very cool. So trying to figure out, because I know that working with Jovo, and I figured out a lot of different things over the years with it, but one of the parts that are still the pain points on this, because really this is Snatchword's my first really big cross-platform where I'm doing a number of screens and things, and I still definitely need to do the interactive canvas part on Google, and the screens are separate in Bixby. In essence, my code works with data and then sends that data back to Bixby, and then I have to do all the view stuff on the Bixby side. So that's probably the part of my code that is the messiest, is if I try to abstract things and say, okay, at this point in time, this is my response, and this is the view that I'm going to show. And then I say, okay, if it's Alexa, do this, if it's Google Assistant, do this, but it's still not there. Now, is multivocal, I guess, available to me for cross-platform yet, or is it Google only at this point?
The answer is decidedly not exactly.
Okay.
Certainly the framework for it is meant to be cross-platform. So as I built it, and then in fact, it is cross-platform in certain ways. So it handles Dialogflow and Actions Builder. It also handles Google Assistant and another one of Google's chat platforms, because they have so many, all of which are different. But that started giving me a feel for what was needed to do real cross-platform work.
Right.
There is the library that I based multivocal on was written to support Alexa. I just never ported the Alexa portion over.
Okay.
So it's there. It's ready for me to do. I just never got the chance to do it. And similarly, one of the things that I've been thinking about in developing it for Bixby is, since Bixby needs the view and doesn't need the response part, what needs to be done? What are the changes that need to be done to just send back the view? And how do we control what elements of a view need to get sent back for each reply in ways that make the most sense? So I think logically, the ideas are there, and I think the ideas will fit in. I just haven't had the time to put it together. But certainly, and I have to admit up front, it doesn't do all of the same stuff that Jovo does.
Right.
Jovo, for example, has very much focused on the designing the intents and designing the user input part and making those available in all of the other platforms. Multivocal, I don't even think about that side of it. I'm purely focused on the delivery level part of it. So when stuff comes in, I can recognize, okay, did it come in under Dialogflow's platform, so I need to reply to it that way? Did it come in under Actions on Google? Did it come in using Google Chat? And break those parts up and extract the bits of information out into the environment in a platform neutral way. But that's the extent of what I do on the input side. I mostly focus on the output side in multivocal.
I'm wondering how at least some of your concepts could, or like maybe the library could be in multiple parts, where if you wanted, like if I wanted to handle do all the handler stuff the way that I'm used to doing it in Jovo, but then hand off okay, I'm here. I'm at the point where I want to return a response. Here's all the data that I need that might affect which response comes back. Pass that off to something and then come back and say, here's what you get. And the response. So.
Yeah, you and I talked about this in the past when we've talked about some of our work. And I certainly, in talking to the Jovo folks and talking to Jan, I feel like they're heading Jovo down a path that will get us to a point where that might make sense to try to do. Or it might head them down a path where they're doing the same sort of thing in their own way. And it might be a more Jovo way of doing things.
Yeah.
I don't know. And honestly, right now, I feel like we're early enough that I want us to explore all the different ways of doing things. Because I don't think any of us have an answer as to the best way to do it. I think this template focus is vitally important. And I think Bixby thinks that template approach is vitally important. And I think we're even seeing hints that Alexa thinks that a template approach is important. But and maybe Jovo is heading in that direction as well, but which template makes the most sense and what are the elements of it that are important? I don't know. And I want us to, I don't want us to merge and standardize on something too quickly.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think there's definitely, I like looking at what other people have done and understanding, the approach that they took and say, I like this, 30% or this 70% of what they've done, but I want to do some additional things. And one of the things that I did like at least about, I guess all my years of experience doing web stuff on Microsoft Stack is that there were different points where you could say, oh, I want to use this syntax or this engine to generate my views, or I want to use this one. And so it's got to happen at some point in time that there is that these frameworks have pluggable implementations where you could say, I want to swap out this view, engine, and the view in this case could be just the, SSML, the speech part of it, or it could be speech and display. So
one of the things that I think held me up for a while in implementing Speech Markdown into it was saying, well, what if something else comes along? How closely do I really want to tie Speech Markdown to?
Yeah.
But I finally said, you know what? Speech Markdown is the right thing at the right time in the right, the right place, the right time. It's the right technology, and if I need to split it out later, I will do so. But right now, I want to encourage its use because I'd rather encourage it over nothing, which is what I think a lot of people were thinking still.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of people that just haven't hit that type of thing, and you're not using it for the cross-platform part of it, but that is something that you could use later. But it is a simpler syntax, and it is a way to I like just being able to throw in a couple braces and one S and be done with my break and not have to type in the whole.
One of the things that was fun for me in implementing it was I ran into a couple of issues, as you heard. One of which was, I planned to, one of the things I discovered right after integration and testing out Crosstalk was that it suddenly started spewing SSML. It started, saying bracket, mark, whatever, and so forth and so on. So it was speaking the SSML. And I realized that's because I was using a tag that wasn't yet supported.
Right.
So I went to implement it. And when I went to implement it, the tag that I was going to base it on wasn't working. So first I got the break tag working. And then once I had that in place, I was able to get the mark tag to work. I don't know, do we call them tags in Speech Markdown? What do we call them?
Yeah, I think I still call them tags. Yeah.
Symbol language, the mark. So I got break working first. And it was a great credit that most of the documentation that you had in place in the code was pretty straightforward and easy to use. It was not difficult for me to figure out. More difficult was me to figure out the parser itself.
Yeah, the parser is a little challenging. I don't have a lot of experience in lexers and parsers and that side of things, and I know that there's some other projects out there that like there would be that you could write a piece of code that would say, I want to convert this this text into actually, because what really I guess part of the power of speech markdown is that there is this intermediate format, which is really this abstract syntax tree that's based on this MINA parser that I'm using. It's not like a formal intermediate format, but things in the end get into this format, and then we can say, oh, I want to convert from that into the flavor of SSML for Google or Alexa or Bixby, and so. And that gives me or just plain text, which gives me the ability to say, oh, this only implements these certain tags. And so I'm just going to ignore these other tags and return nothing coming back in those cases. There is more that could be done in the library just to formally define what speech markdown is from I guess a data perspective, and then do work to convert things from something else into that, and then from that back out into something else. Ultimately, there's another project, I don't remember what the name of it is right now, that has a lot of that type of stuff in it, and would love to be able to do that. But at some point somebody's going to come around that's going to be like some expert in in parsers, and all of my dreams will come true. Or I'll just trudge through like I've been doing with.
Yeah, I think going through the code, one of the things that really made me feel good about, because it has been decades since I last did parser work as well.
Yeah.
And that was not a fun time when I did. But one of the things that was nice and refreshing to see is that you also have kind of started to set it up for, where do we go next? What are the things that speech markdown needs to do? Again, not so much to help with the cross-platform elements of it, but just to help with if I want to write stuff out and I want to write out simpler, and I just want to say, I need this block to be spoken faster and quieter. How do I do that?
Yep.
How do I symbolically represent that, and how do I do it in the easiest possible way? And I think that's powerful, because that's when we can start getting people who are not programmers and who are still getting their feet wet with conversation design, but have an ear for what they want it to sound like. That we can pull people who are great script writers into doing the work and focusing on what they want it to do, and focusing on, how do I want it to sound?
Yeah, exactly.
How do I format it so that it sounds how I want it to sound?
Yeah, like Alexa's whisper tag. I like the fact that there's a whisper tag. I don't use it very much, but there are different situations where that adds a certain dramatic effect. But Google doesn't support it, and so what I do is I make the rate of the speech go slower and the volume less. So it's not a great solution, but it's better than nothing at all. At least tries to do something in that case. And as either SSML expands, or companies add their own custom tags, then we can map to whatever. But in the end, use like this concept of a whisper, that I want this text to be whispered, then it might be implemented differently on each platform, but at least now you can convert from one to the other, and you just have to worry about one tag as opposed to all the different tags.
And I think of that as even one step more, that it's not even so much that the script writer working with the audio engineer now needs to think about one tag versus multiple tags. It's that the script writer can just, at some point say, here's this squiggly, between this squiggly mark and this squiggly mark, I want it to sound this way. And now the audio engineer says, well, okay, on Alexa, we can do it this way, and on Google, we can do it this way, or, And on this other platform, we've got no way of doing it, so tough. But it now becomes a conversation. It now becomes a conversation between the scriptwriter
Right.
and the audio engineer, and not the programmer.
Yeah.
It's no longer, taught over to us to figure out how do we change the code to do that. It puts the people who are best able to do it to I don't know, what's the parallel of visualize? Audioize? We need a new word here.
Yeah.
Imagine. The person who can imagine what it should sound like.
Yeah.
Empowering them as much as possible. And I think that's what I was thinking about this over the weekend, that's really what our two libraries are doing, is empowering people as much as we can, and then working to empower them even more as we develop the projects.
Exactly. So I do appreciate the pull requests on Speech Markdown. And thank you for doing unit tests too. That was something that I thought from the very beginning really needed to happen on this project, is unit tests, so that you could run through and make sure that nothing else broke. And
yep. No, I'm very jealous of your unit test, by the way. We will talk about testing another time, I think, because I think we've got some good conversations to go about about testing and conversations. But that'll be another day, I think, because we can cover that extensively. No, but I was really thrilled to see them there, because that was what helped me understand, okay, what's the best way of testing it? And certainly, I was mucking around with the parser, which has all the possibility of breaking things.
Yes, it does.
So, not just after I put mine in and after I made sure that mine worked, it was reassuring to go back and run through the entire suite of unit tests and make sure that everything else worked okay.
Yeah, no, I more than once have added something and broken something else on the parser part of things. And so it's just, unit tests give you that confidence that you can play around, but then you know that these tests have passed. And I've tried in the past, when somebody's reported a bug, to write a test that proves that bug is there, and then fix it, and now that's part of the unit test. So that's something I'm trying to do as well as I go along with the project.
No, it's the best. It's what I do on my work stuff all the time. It's what I try to do for my private projects as well. I tend not to test my own stuff using unit tests, but when I get bug reports, the first thing I do is duplicate it with a test. Yeah. And this way I know when I fixed it. And this way I know if it ever crops up again.
Right. That's good. So that gave me a good excuse to get back into Speech Markdown. It had been a while since I'd been in that project, and went ahead, and there had been some new additions to SSML on the Bixby side of things that I just hadn't. So, I took advantage of the stuff that you had done with the break tag, and just added the short form of the break, and then some different things with say as and some prosody stuff that they had added since the last time I was in there, because I had added Bixby support a while ago on a project, and things just worked, which I like very much.
That's always happy when things
when that happens, yeah. And so then I noticed that I was getting pauses now in my because part of my work that I've been doing with Snatchword over the weekend was trying to get a Bixby version out. So things are really close. You might even see. Well, you probably won't unless you're farther down on the leaderboard and next to my Bixby test user. There is one person on the leaderboard way down that is my Bixby user as I'm beta testing things. So things are working, at least to that point. I think I've got 3 different bug reports into Samsung on trying to help me figure out some things. One's a cosmetic thing that I'm like, well, it would be better if you did this, because right now I'm hard coding security stuff inside of my code, which I don't want to do. But then I've got some, the big problem is for some reason my leaderboard's not coming back. It was working on Bixby before, and then something happened. I don't know if it was just a most recent update that I did with the Bixby Studio or what, but
Weird.
yeah. So, and it locks up. It locks up the
Ouch.
studio. Yeah. So I'm just like, don't know what's going on. I even tried turning that part off where I'm not returning anything back from the server as far as the data that makes up the leaderboard, and it's still doing that. So strange. Everything else is working just fine.
Well, that's good. So before I forget, where can people find Speech Markdown?
Okay. So there is a project on GitHub. There's a whole organization called Speech Markdown. So if you just do GitHub and search for Speech Markdown, you'll find the speechmarkdown.js project, which is the one that you were working in. That's the Node JS project that I use. There's a Jovo plugin for Speech Markdown that's been updated now with a later version, with the most recent version of Speech Markdown. And so now that's in my Snatch word code too now, but that's there. There's a number of different projects that are out there on that project. So you can do that, or the easiest thing might be to do is just to go to speechmarkdown.org. There's a whole website about Speech Markdown. The documentation's not 100% up to speed. So I haven't updated that part of the website.
Documentation is always rough, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But there are links to the GitHub projects from there, and there is a tab called Try, where you can type in Speech Markdown, and then you can see what it looks like in Alexa, Google, and Bixby, and plain text. And I tested your new break tag stuff and mark tagged, and that's working in there now. So that's up and going. So that was a lot of my coding over the kind of the break that I had. I didn't 100% spend my time in front of the computer. I did spend time with family and on projects and watching movies. And I did get Disney Plus and watch the whole Mandalorian series, and wow, I'm impressed with that.
I strongly recommend Mandalorian was fun. I strongly recommend Soul if you haven't watched it yet.
I watched that as well, and really watched that with the family, and we really enjoyed that. That was such a gem of a movie. Really
it was. I love the story. Visually, it is an amazing Pixar story. Pixar always surprises me.
Yep.
They far exceeded what I was expecting on that.
Yeah,
one.
so really like that. I learned about some of the technology behind the Mandalorian with the volume, which is basically a holodeck.
It's a holodeck. It's a huge screen that, it's amazing.
And it's so crazy. So, no more blue screen, green screen. They just actually project stuff up into this room.
Yep.
And some of the stuff is, real live props that then merge into their counterpart, and has the Unreal gaming engine behind the scenes, and you can change things in real time, and then you film against the screens, and so actors can interact with or really see what's on the screens, and the cameras can get the angles that they need, and you can totally swap out where you're at on this. I know, just amazing.
It's amazing technology.
Yeah. So that's some of the other things I did over my break. But
so I've been working a lot on multivocal, and people can find it at multivocal.info. But also spending a lot of time with family, and that's when I saw Soul as well, and just generally relaxing. It was just a nice relaxing break, and now I'm ready to dive into 2021 and do stuff.
Yes,
and not just coding, just do stuff.
Yeah, there is looking to get out more than I was in 2020. But just everybody can keep being safe out there. There's lots of good things to look forward to. I know that I still have up days and down days too. So it's just the way that things go. And if you want to chat to us about code or about what's happening with you, or just need some friendly chatting, then just reach out on social media, at Mark Tucker for me.
At A First and Bird for me. Please reach out. Tell us what you like about the show, what you don't like, what you'd like to hear more of coming forward. Or again, just reach out if you just need to chat.
Yep. And or catch us on Voice Lunch Tuesdays and Fridays.
Good places to find us.
All right. Well, take care, everyone, and happy coding, and we'll chat soon.
Take care, everyone. See you then. We are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs.